As mentioned, this is not a panel with much prep on my side. I have one question to start us off, and that is R1cs dead?
Me? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Is R1cs dead? Do you think that now we live in a
post
Plonk
R1cs world? Like post-truth, but post R1cs. I don't know. I think we will, moving forward, have. Is there feedback?
We hear you.
Yeah, we will have some systems which still use R1cs, but I think what you'll see increasingly is sort of taking R1cs and maybe augmenting it with things like lookup tables, maybe increasing the arity of R1cs. So it won't look like the R1cs that we all know and love. It'll maybe look something different. Maybe it's not R1cs anymore. I don't know.
I mean, from a standardization point of view, having one set of constraints which everybody agrees on, everyone's using the same terminology, everyone's writing the same systems, using the same programming languages, all the rest of it, that is really nice. From making snarks fast and being able to do cool tricks like lookup tables and other tricks, R1cs kind of doesn't support that. So I would like to see a world where we do agree on a constraint system, but maybe we need something which is a bit more expressive, where we have a bit more ability to play with it.
Got it. Is R1cs dead?
I think there's a good chance it will die, because the reason it came to prominence is that it captures really nicely what you can do in snarks in what's called the GGPR approach, which led to Grot16, which roughly means what you do is you check a verifier equation in a secret point in the exponent. And then, since we only have pairings, we don't have trilinear maps, or it captures really nicely what you can do with that. And that approach had some nice advantages, but it had this big disadvantage of setup per circuit. And I think that disadvantage is gonna, make that approach to constructing snarks like sort of not be used. And we're going to all move to this other approach, this polynomial IOP approach. I'd like to say a word, because you said Plonk. There is a sense in which Plonk is getting too much credit, in the sense that everything that is not R1cs, people call it Plonk. Like any sort of constraint which is not R1cs, it gets accredited to Plonk. So in a sense, that's giving Plonk too much credit, because in a sense, Plonk went back to the way people were writing constraints before R1cs. Sort of the genius of GGPR R1cs was to manage to do things with just a degree 2 rather than degree 3 equation, which is easier to think to come up with. And they came up with this thing that you only need degree 2, and so a pairing is enough. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on it.
Is there nothing that can be done to R1cs, modified, changed, that could bring in some of those characteristics?
I think R1cs is not necessarily just restricted to GGPR or like these linear PCP style snarks. You can combine it with the polynomial IOP model, which sort of allows you to use these lookup techniques, custom gate-ish. I mean, it stops being R1cs at some point. I guess I don't know what the threshold is. But yeah, you could do, like, for example, R1cs with lookup tables. It should be totally plausible. And yeah, then you don't have that exact structure of R1cs, but yeah, I mean, it's still maybe the spirit of R1cs would live on. But also, I think people are like doing new stuff with R1cs. For example, in terms of recursive snarks, the most efficient recursive snarks that we know of today use R1cs or a variant of it. And yeah, the recursion cost is like 30,000 constraints, 25,000 constraints, which R1cs constraints, and the constants are very low. So I think maybe in some niche use cases, and maybe there's a spirit of R1cs will live on. But yeah, maybe people will stop slowly using things which just do pure R1cs like ROT16 and such.
Cool. By the way, feel free to jump in at any time. So for those who just arrived a little bit later, the way this works is we started off on a topic, but we actually open the floor to anyone here who has an idea, comment, question. If it's just a question, the panelists will answer. But if it's all opinionated, or if it's more of a comment, then you'll be switching places with one of these participants. So I want to open the floor. I do have like a few other questions in case you need to like spend some time thinking about this, but I do need your questions for this to work. So are there any questions? All right. There's a mic. That's what I need.
Hi. Are there too many different Plonk implementations?
What was this? Are there too many? Was it?
Yeah.
Different Plonk implementations?
That sounds a little bit opinionated. Okay,
yeah.
they're going to answer, and you're going to switch. You're coming up.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, because that's been on my mind, and I think it relates to the pandemic, because we weren't running into each other, as frequently as we used to. Then teams were working by themselves, which has advantages, but it's created, I think, very strong double efforts. It's not double, it's decimal effort, whatever it is.
Exponential effort.
Many effort situation. Yeah, we've seen here in the talks today a lot of nice talks, but yeah, right, a lot of groups, including us, Aztec, are creating, similar tooling. So I hope now that the world is coming back a little more to normal, that we'll be able to, right, we need to think of collaboration mechanisms where, at the same time, companies, some things they want to keep to themselves sometimes, but at the same time, how can we, make joint infrastructure in a way that's convenient for everybody, and there's not too many overheads of I'm using that format, you're using this. So I hope we'll figure that out. Of course, it's more general than Plonk, all this polynomial IOP approach, including Marlin. A lot of the components are very similar.
I would say having as many different implementations for the same verifier as possible would, in general, be great. The problem is they're not the same verifier. Everyone's verifier is just subtly different. So when it comes to sort of saying, if this one breaks, that's fine, we can just use someone else's implementation. Currently, we're not at that point.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think, people sort of have been experimenting over the past couple of years, trying different techniques, different implementation strategies. And I think that's a good thing, especially with like new tech. You need to have, let 1,000 flowers bloom. But I think we're also seeing now some more standardization efforts like Vampire, and I know there's like a bunch of people trying to corral the implementations all into like go in the same direction a little bit. So
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, which one of you needs to leave first?
I think I was talking a lot, so
Okay.
I'll leave.
All right, so you're going to take his place, eh? Come on up. Welcome to the stage. Yeah. What have I done? All right. Are there any other questions? Now you know what happens. Remember, if you make a very clear, just a question with no opinion, then they'll just answer it. But if you have an opinion, you're coming up here.
Not that scary up here.
It's totally fine. Oh, and those folks who are at the back, if you don't mind, try coming a little closer just so the mic holder doesn't have to run around too much. Oh, yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Kev. I'm a software engineer.
You're Kev! Wow. Cool. I know you. That's so cool. I didn't know that was you. Wow. All right, question. I saw one.
Oh, jeez. I guess because it's Aztec and Alio, does privacy belong on L1 or L2?
Do we think this is there an opinionated?
No, that's an either or.
What do we think? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. But they'll answer the question and you're coming up.
I think privacy belongs everywhere, right? As much
Kappa.
privacy as you want, as you can get your hands on.
You want it?
Fight.
I mean, from a technical perspective, it can be very challenging to get privacy at layer 2 and not at layer 1, because you're always going to be in the situation where you have to put the transaction on-chain under a public address, which then can be used to de-anonymize you unless you go through a centralized provider. So there are some challenges to just doing it at layer 2. I would also say there's some problems to just doing it at layer 1, actually, which go along the lines of if somebody breaks your protocol, you might not know about it. So it's a tricky one. I'm not sure where I stand.
Do you want to answer that one?
I only went. I said privacy everywhere.
Oh, yeah, you did. Sorry, you didn't answer.
Yeah, I don't know. I just know that privacy is hard. So.
Cool. All right, next up off the docket. I know you have a meeting, so, all right, you're coming up. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? There's one.
Is the future of solving MEV more privacy or less MEV in ways that are not private?
Ooh, that sounds pretty neutral. Shall we answer that? There's no opinion in there, is there?
There's always an opinion.
Are you saying you want to come? Okay, why don't we'll do it. We'll do a lot of.
What was the question again? I didn't catch it fully.
MEV.
So some projects are solving MEV by doing batch executions under privacy layers, whatever their implementation is. And that actually has the convenient property that if you're doing batch executions and no one can see the transactions, then you actually don't have an MEV problem. There are other solutions to MEV that sort of look like MEV mitigations, and I think there are probably MEV solutions that I don't know about. So the question is the future of MEV, which is by extension the future of smart contracts that deal with any sort of financial application, is it privacy, or are there other MEV solutions that come to mind?
Are you saying the solution to MEV, like the threshold decryption kind of thing?
Well, so I think the argument is in some sense philosophical, because I think some people take the position that MEV just moves to other places when you squash it in one place. And I think that, say Penumbra, for instance. Penumbra does a decentralized exchange with Zcash style shielded transactions that are batch executed. So the sort of like neat thing about that is that they've done a particular kind of smart contract. Their entire chain is like this specific decentralized exchange application, and they've engineered their own chain to do it, Zcash style transactions, and they don't have to worry about MEV. So MEV is kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Now that's an opinion. I do want to get their answers, and then you're going to come up.
Yeah, no, I think, we need sort of probably both, because there's just so many kinds of MEV, right? Some of them can be stopped via specific privacy measures, but others, like, I could just drop everybody's transaction except the ones that I want, that I know are mine, for example, right? So you could do like those kinds of attacks as well. And also, I think just space is way too early to sort of, just go in on one particular approach and be like, this is the end-all, be-all of mitigating MEV, right? So I think probably what we'll see in the future is a hybrid of all these approaches. I mean, that's a boring answer, but...
Do you have thoughts on that? Privacy MEV?
Yeah, so I think what Penumbra is doing is really cool, and I think that those MEV mitigation mechanisms will be really interesting. So William, actually in the back, had a really interesting take on this. And so there's this tension between being sort of censorship resistant and being MEV resistant. Because you can imagine a world in which like a rollup would have a centralized sequencer, and that sequencer would have like some reputation at stake, and he just wouldn't extract any MEV, because we can tell when MEV has been extracted. And so it's possible that users might like opt for more like censorship susceptibility if they're guaranteed to not have MEV extracted from them. And like you can already see, I'm just like parroting what William said, but you can already see this happening with flashbots, where users will like actually accept centralization and like censorship susceptibility because they know that they're less susceptible to MEV. So that's interesting.
What do you think, Kev? Are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I should preface and say I don't have very strong opinions on most of these things. I will say that the way the question was docked, it seemed like MEV was a bad thing in my head.
I agree.
Well, with the miner getting like if you pay transaction fees and that goes to the miner, wouldn't you class it as MEV? I wouldn't.
Is that not a traditional transaction? That is what a transaction is you include a transaction fee, it goes to the miner. But MEV is if the miner were to sequence, suppose you were going to trade coin A to coin B, and the miner said, I see your transaction, and I'm going to put some transaction in front of you and some transaction behind you. You've been sandwiched, they've driven the price up in front of you, and that's MEV.
Right.
So,
yeah, I define MEV as any way the miner can extract value, which is also from transaction fees. But yeah, I see what you're saying, and that the way that you explain it that way is bad. Yeah, I don't know. I've never seen MEV as a really pressing problem. I agree with Brendan that censorship resistance is more an important problem. So yeah.
All right, so I think you're now off, if you want to leave your mic there. Pass the mic to Alex. By the way, is that Chris at the back? Hi. Actually, Alex, thank you so much for helping me out. Chris maybe can help us out now. Awesome, yeah, come up. Yay! Okay, more questions. Oh yeah, do you want to introduce yourself?
hi friends, I'm Thor. I work on threshold signatures at a project called Entropy.
And we saw your slides flashed for a minute here, the pink squiggles?
Yeah, I scribble on slides, and I did a talk earlier about distributed key generation, and I also hang out in the ZK Hack Discord channel and talk about zero-knowledge proofs with the study group.
Yeah.
Hello.
Very nice. All right, questions.
So the question is the future more computation on-chain or off-chain?
I think that's an okay question. That's a question, right? Okay, that's a question. Is there more, is the future more computation on-chain or off-chain?
So I can take the cop-out answer and say, obviously it's going to be off-chain because most computation occurs off-chain. But if I was going to take the slightly less cop-out answer, I think the question is really, are we going to implement prover-verifier schemes on-chain for like all significant blockchain projects at some point? And I think that question is almost certainly most computation will occur off-chain. I think that if you actually wanted to achieve throughput at scale, the obvious way to do it is to reduce your asymptotic complexity on-chain to verifying a proof. And I think that's sort of why I think the whole zero-knowledge thing is neat, because it reduces to verifiable computing. If you can do O of n squared operations on-chain instead of O of n 2 to the power of n operations on-chain, obviously you should do that, because that's going to be cheaper. That's sort of how I think about the direction of how do you scale blockchains. You would like scale blockchains by reducing your complexity, and you do that by doing more computation off-chain and supplying a proof.
What about you?
Yeah.
Oh, I think, is your mic off?
Is it off?
Here, do you want to use somebody else's real quick? There's a way to open it. I think you have to do something at the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it's off-chain because I would hope that like the work that I'm doing and many others are doing will like end up with a lot of computation moving to L2. So yeah, but I think it like necessarily must, right? Because like we can't be stuck with like Ethereum's transaction throughput indefinitely, and so I mean, I think it'll either be off-chain or we won't really be doing many ZK summits in the future.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the answer is quite obvious in my opinion. Verifying execution on chain seems to be the way forward.
All right. Any other questions? Oh.
So it's like common to, the future's off-chain computation is that how do we actually, differentiate between Web 3 and Web 2, right? So one of the main features is really composability, right? That's on-chain, you can have things that interoperate, right? Just share the same interfaces like ERC20 and stuff like that. But when you really move to off-chain walled gardens, are we just doing everything essentially that Web 2 is doing just with ZKPs?
I think now there's a comment and a little bit of an opinion.
Yeah, I had an opinion.
I think you're done, right?
That was another comment, supposed to be a question again.
Oh, okay. So you want to hear from them, and then you're going to switch. Okay. Thoughts? Opinions?
I didn't hear what you were saying.
I might have thoughts. They're currently forming, but as I'm sort of stalling for time, I think that the way to address that question is that in Web 2 world, let's take your email, for instance. I don't really think any part of your email should live on chain. I think there's like a project that's working to like invent a spam filter where like if you don't have an address on a whitelist, then they have to send you like some unit of currency to pay for the attention that you're going to waste by archiving or spamming their message. But realistically, like none of your email should really be on chain. So if we're going to talk about stuff that should be on chain, it usually has stuff to do with like there's an obvious like incentive for an adversary to like come over, bonk you, and steal your shit. So in Web 2 world, which I kind of resist the dichotomy a little bit and prefer to think of it about like what incentives do people have to like come over and bonk you and steal your stuff. I think like Web 3 world is about like we actually have an incentive to come over and bonk you and steal your stuff, and that obviously has applications in anything that has to do with like finance, which is sort of like why DeFi is blown up, but it also has to do with like stuff like how do we organize communities that like produce value, so like the DAO stuff that's happening. I guess like I've now forgotten the question, but I just sort of nattered for a while.
Lots of opinions over here. Well, would it be time for you to come up? I think so.
Sure.
I think you've been here the longest, right?
Who, me?
Yeah?
It's voiced an opinion yet.
Right? Who came on before? You were on the longest.
Yeah.
Okay, then he takes your spot. No. We try to keep it in order. I have one job. Pay attention to who's here, and I don't do it very well, usually by the end of the day. Come on up. I love how everyone's clapping this time. We don't usually do that, but it's nice. Who are you?
Wei Dai from Bain Capital Crypto.
Cool.
If you recognize my name, it might not be from the right context. I'm not the inventor of B-Money.
Okay. Oh, good to know. All right. Questions, comments, thoughts. We need active people here. This is the only way it works. Also, just like I said before, people in the back, if you can come up a little closer, that would be awesome.
With layer 2, have we solved the scalability trilemma?
With layer 2, have we solved the scalability trilemma? Is that an opinion? Is this
I think it depends on whether you consider like a centralized sequencer at L2 to be decentralized. But I mean, certainly like, yeah, we can like compress basically an unbounded amount of computation on L2 and then put it on L1 and so.
I don't think we have. If you look at layer 2s, it's actually very centralized, right? Centralized sequencers. So you're essentially, like, you're reducing one of the axes, right? Like, there's no decentralization. So you have now solved.
But you can still exit, right? So you still have like censorship resistance on L1.
If you have the escape hatch, right? But that doesn't have the same throughput. So if you want to decentralize that, essentially L2s will be chains themselves, and the same problems will show up. I think.
I suppose that I don't believe that the scalability trilemma is a good formulation of general problems that we're attacking. It's a formulation of some of the problems, but I think as a meme, it's kind of now been proven to not really be a trilemma. So I suppose that we can achieve scalability, decentralization, and security simultaneously. Or I think that's the trilemma axes. Is that it? Scalability, security, and decentralization. Yeah. Well, I guess we did all those things. We just haven't done scalability, security, decentralization, privacy, MEV resistance, and censorship resistance. I don't know, other things too.
All right. Any other questions? We need questions, or otherwise this thing doesn't work. So come up with something, people. Or an opinion? Thought? On anything that we're talking about?
Raise of hands if you think blockchain is net negative for the world.
Isn't a net, wait.
Is net negative
If you
for the
think
world.
blockchain is a negative for the world,
I was at RWC last
I
week.
feel like no one's allowed to put their hand up here.
It was So like, no, I think, really, so like when I was at RWC last week and 80% of these cryptographers at a RWC, Real World Crypto Conference, put up their hand, and the guy who spoke up said it was an environmental crisis. So I think like that's sort of a signal that we still have a lot of communication to do, and that we're pretty much drowned out by people who do communication real well and real bad.
I see someone with a mic.
Are we moving towards a world where all chains are at least trying to interoperate, and is that a world that we want to move towards?
Can I steel man the case for like a chain that should exist in isolation? I feel like the best you could possibly do is say like, if you could provide a path that being isolated was more secure and admittedly less useful, but more secure, maybe you'd be able to do that. But I don't actually think that the interoperability of a chain is correlated to its security. So I say no.
So the question was whether we, like just empirically, like whether we are moving to that world. Yeah, I mean, there are more chains now.
They're interoperating.
I think so. Yeah, we should, build chains that interoperate with each other, while keeping in mind that with different consensus, as there's security compromises, right? That's when you do bridging, if your consensus do a rollback, there's ramifications of that, right? But I think that's like a choice that you should have to make. But we should make chains that's interoperable. And not only interoperable, but actually like composable and like by default in some sense.
Also, we should be really clear about the security of bridges and like how we like communicate what the risks are to users, because clearly hasn't happened.
Anyone else? Oh, there's one over here.
Should we get Ferdinand on?
I try to balance it out, so I usually try to give people a chance.
Do you guys see like, super loud, sorry. Do you guys see like a place for any sort of other rollup once and if like zero knowledge figures out the centralization of the sequencer and like making the execution a lot cheaper? Do you see like optimism, Arbitrum existing in that world, or is that just like a temporary patch for like demand for Ethereum block space?
I'm going to switch you out. It was just a good question. I want you to come up. No, you got it. You got it. Come on. No, you can. It's totally easy.
That's a cultural question.
You can switch out for me, but
you have to do it.
It's a question like fraud proofs versus ZK proofs, or well,
yeah, or you could. Sure.
Yeah, I think capital efficiency wins ultimately, and so like I think validity proofs will, like assuming like performance and throughput and latency, I think ZK rollups will win.
Come up. It's great. We get to meet you. It's super chill here. I promise. It's really easy. We're not mean. It's true. All right.
You're going to do great.
What are you doing? Who are you?
Oh, I'm Walt. I work at Galaxy on research.
Nice to meet you. Wait, what was that question though? Again, let's say it again.
Do you see a place for other type of like roll-up schemes outside of zero knowledge? If sequencing and they get a lot cheaper.
Are you seeing other schemes past what we've already seen, like roll-up optimistic, or is there some other stuff that's on your radar?
No. But I was curious if other people had other schemes.
If anyone else has,
If you look at
let us know.
what ZK rollups do, right? So because rollups are rollup because data is on-chain, right? So you have the data, you want essentially on-chain like line to verify that it's executed correctly. That's essentially a zero-knowledge proof that's, for a given set of call data or state changes and, everything's done correctly, right? And maybe I don't see how you could, improve on that. It's pretty standard. It sounds pretty standard to, have a, if you do have a ZK rollup, right?
I guess like more so the question was like, if that takes longer than expected, so like push it out like 3-5 years before it's like fully ready, let's just say that even if you disagree with that, let's just say if that happens. And then you have like Arbitrum or Optimism, they launch a token, they get incentives, they get users, and you get like seamless liquidity exits by like protocols that are just like harboring the capital inefficiency and charging like a minuscule fee. And you have, let's say like 20 different versions of Optimism just batching all the transactions. Like now this has like a network effect, a complementary effect. Like you can just go instantly onto Arbitrum from a centralized exchange if you're retail, right? Or from an app, like I think it's called like Argent is an app that does it natively. So like not necessarily that it's the better technology. Like do you see a way to get users on there? I mean, obviously you can do like incentives, but.
Well, sorry.
All right, I suppose I ultimately think the answer is that if you can do a zero-knowledge rollup that is doing its stuff as you would expect and is optimized and all that, then you've sort of won the game. But of course, that's a lot more complex to implement than an optimistic rollup, since fraud proofs are just simpler to implement. Which is to say that you basically have a lot of research and implementation cost to get something like that off the ground, a ZK rollup off the ground. But I suppose that this is going to be true any place that zero-knowledge proofs are going to be applied, that you're going to see sort of the several stages of an ecology, where one of the earlier stages of an ecology is no proofs, and then you get fraud proofs, and you get zero-knowledge proofs. I sound like a crackpot, but the answer, I think, is that no, you probably do end up looking at zero-knowledge rollups at scale because you can get better scalability properties and better trust assumptions.
But I think what he's talking about here is time to market, capturing, yes, they'll be better, but will they win?
Oh, yes.
Do you know what I mean? Because
better scalability and lower trust assumptions.
Better trust assumptions, maybe slightly better scalability, but what if everyone's already somewhere and everything's been built there and they don't really want to move?
Oh, okay. So this is marketing. Marketing is really powerful.
The other part, yeah.
I think same thing's happening with Polygon, right? You have sidechains essentially receiving more traffic than rollups because they're earlier, right?
Marketing is really powerful.
All right, I see a question over here.
So it's more like an opinion.
Okay, yay.
But basically, to your point, I think whether the technology is going to win depends on whether technology itself has network effects, right? So I don't see ZKPs as necessarily having the network or fraud proofs having network effect. It's the chain that uses them has network effects. But if ZKPs become powerful and easy enough to use, I don't see why Arbitrum or Optimism will not switch to them, even if they build the ecosystem. So,
wow.
Yeah, I mean, if it's cheaper and more efficient, and it doesn't make any difference for them which technology they use if they already have the users, and it becomes better to use ZKPs.
I love that. It means ZK wins in the end anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, opinion for sure. Do you guys want to respond?
I suppose that unless you believe that institutional inertia or momentum or like institutional knowledge like plays a role, and like maybe they'll just like stick with fraud proofs because that's what they know. But I think that's kind of like a how do human organizations work question. And the answer is that if they're obviously possible to implement and superior in practice, and there's reason for them to do so, then they will at least try, and they probably will at least try.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. I think you two are switching, actually. Thor, I think you're off.
Who want to replace me?
That's the next person. All right. Any questions? All right. Oh, introduction. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm Bobin. I work on Polygon Maiden.
He gave a talk earlier today, too. Oh, yeah, clapping. We forgot about that, eh? Okay, next.
Yeah, in the interest of not letting you off so easily, let's imagine a hypothetical in which there is an ironclad, perfect privacy, layer 1, zero-knowledge proof that is strictly prover verifier. What things do you still put on layer 2? Or what things do you put on other blockchains? Is the answer nothing or something?
Well,
you're coming up anyway.
To respond to your question, well, that's more a comment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think you can actually do like a perfect private L1 with just other proofs. It's actually what I did, talk about in my talk.
In the hypothetical world, for philosophical reasons, what do you do in that environment? Is that it? Then you have infinite throughput. You have your dream layer 1. Is that it? Then now you don't put anything on layer 2 or on other chains that don't interoperate?
Yeah. So here's an idea, right? So like, look hundreds of years into the future. Here's the argument for why we need multi-chain, right? Is that if we're actually going to be on different planets, humanity is going to be like, on Earth, Mars, like different galaxies, you need different chains unless you solve like the communication problem, right? Of like, you can't go over the speed of light. So I think, we need multi-chains, and also, like zooming into right now, we have different communities, right? So this is what Anoma is working on, right? So I think you just can't build one L1 for everything. And so there will be multiple chains. And so therefore, probably, I guess this does not argue for L2s or rollups, but I think, I do think there's going to be multiple chains and interoperability between them. So,
cool.
And with that.
I think you, yes, and with that. Thanks.
To follow up on that, I actually think the question is a bit tricky. Like if you have perfect something, that it means there is no possibility to improve it, but it also implies that you believe that there is no progress left to be achieved. So if if you think that human civilization kind of stops progressing, then yeah, there is nothing else to add. But even if you have something perfect at this point in time, people will invent something. And the question is, will this perfect chain adopt the new stuff, or will you have to create a new chain that adopts the new kind of improvements over time? So.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, actually, we didn't do an intro.
Oh, hi, I'm Justin. I'm with Threshold. I'm mostly up here because now that Thor's gone, there's a need to have at least someone up here who has spent substantial amount of time frustratingly responding to Tux's pull requests.
Oh, I thought you were going to say...
always maintain one of them up here.
I thought you were going to comment on the fact that you guys have the same shoes.
Oh, well, that's a consequence of... They're related.
Okay.
Controversial question, opinion. Are we talking too much about blockchains? Are there other applications people want to talk about?
What a good question. You're coming up. Come up here. That's good. I think you're off now. Oh, if you want to answer that.
I don't think so. I don't think there's anything as interesting. So, no.
Cool.
I mean, this is a ZKP summit, so in theory, there should be other applications of ZKP, so maybe we are talking too much about blockchains. Yeah.
Sure. Actually, I met someone this week who was like, I'm doing a ZK thing, not blockchain, and it was a bit like, oh, they exist. All right, let's switch.
Not only are we talking too much about blockchains, we're talking not enough about what a blockchain is in light of, the ideal layer 1 technology.
Welcome to the stage. Who are you?
My name is Jocelyn. I'm a PhD student with Andrew Miller at UIUC.
Fantastic. You just gave a talk.
Yes, I did.
Very nice. Cool. Well, welcome to the stage. Let's do the claps. I like that. Do you have some thoughts on what you just asked, actually?
Decentralized identity.
That would be a use for ZK off. But is it off blockchain? Don't you find like they end up on blockchain for the immutability somehow?
I mean, you could, but you could also just not.
That's true. Oh, there you go.
Some would ask if there is a culture in layer 2s for foregoing security for innovation, given that they hold they usually hold like a large amount of money inside of them. Is this the right way to go?
What was the beginning of that question? I couldn't hear you right away.
The fact that layer 2s are foregoing security for innovation.
They're foregoing security for innovation.
Well, when you say security, do you mean privacy or do you mean privacy and other things?
I mean, the cryptography may not be sort of well audited, for example.
I think in many ways it is like, I think it depends on how you look at it, but you know, the way, for example, a lot of rollups are being rolled out, they don't have escape hatches, for example, already. So you're definitely foregoing some security to you know, build other systems. And I don't know if that's the right trade-off or not, but you know, that's what's happening. Yes.
Do you want to check? I think you. Yeah, I think you guys, when you come up, don't touch the bottom.
Sorry,
because it breaks it.
Oh, yeah, I think it's on.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I think an interesting other thing about that, like you can break security doing a lot of things, right? So if you write your code modularly enough that you can switch in the parts that break security, like that should probably help with some of the move fast but don't break things.
Do you want to come back? I mean, you can, although I kind of want to leave the stage open to a few other folks. What's up?
Yeah, I was wondering what people think about the sort of field-friendly hashes. You know, they're all fairly new. Poseidon, you know, all these things. Is it really a good idea to be building all these systems on very newly developed hashes that hold, you know, lots of money behind them?
I feel like there's like there's an opinion in there. There's a critique. They're going to come up.
I think it's a good idea because that's how you figure out if they're actually secure or not. Otherwise, how would you determine that? So yes, maybe some money will be lost, but at least we'll have field-friendly hashes at the end.
Ooh, trial by fire.
Also, yeah, I guess a couple of things building on that. One, if you write your code modularly enough, you can you can switch it out. And the other one being, I mean, if you look at like history of like original cryptography, a lot of the older hashes, the like functions themselves developed together with good definitions that like didn't exist when they were developed. So given that those exist now, it's quite likely that what we have now is better than, like 2 years in, Poseidon is probably better than SHA-256 may have been 2 years in.
Wow. Thoughts?
I don't know. I'm still using SHA-1. I'll let you know how that goes.
All right. I think you're going to switch out with Bobbin now, I think. Thanks, Bobbin, for being on the stage, and welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. I'm Jeremy Brustel, and I work at R1cs.
Cool. You guys also, you didn't present, but your team presented earlier today.
What was it?
You didn't present, but your team presented earlier today.
Yeah, I was actually there too. Yeah, It was me and Redford.
Oh, you were presenting. Okay, cool. All right. What was, sorry, what was the question again, just to...
Well, my original question, I was just asking about what people felt about the security of the new field-friendly hashes.
Yeah.
Yes. And people seem bullish on them, which, you know, I think actually understandable.
Good.
I was just curious.
All right, are there any other questions? Oh, is there somebody who hasn't asked a question? Oh, yeah, he was there for a while.
So my question is, I feel badly about the security of the snark-friendly hash functions.
Okay.
All right.
I think you're coming up after. Do you have any, do you guys want to comment on that before I think he's taking your place?
No, just come on up.
Yeah, okay, come on up, come back. In retrospect, did we introduce ourselves at the beginning? No. Oh, wow. Okay, who are you? He's back. We get to find out.
Ariel Gabizon. I work at Aztec Network. Before that, I was at Zcash and Protocol Labs. Yeah.
He's worked at a lot of the big ones. What was the thing you just said?
Oh, I gave an opinion that I have a sort of a negative bias against the snark-friendly hash functions. Well, because my intuition is that and I'm not a big hash expert, but my intuition is that for hashes to be secure, you need to mix two like sort of orthogonal operations. Like if you look at Shaw or Blake, or you have the addition mod, say 2 to the 32, and you have the bitwise operations like bitwise XOR. Whereas in the snark-friendly ones, you have to mainly focus on sort of one operation in one universe, your finite field.
All right. Questions? Hands?
My question is, why don't we trust SGX? Is it already broken? And if it's not already broken, will it break before quantum computing arrives in force?
So for one, I think that SGX has had a number of different issues where data has been leaking or other things that have been shown. So there are some places where SGX has had issues in the past. Some of them are not complete breaks, but they're meaningful. Also, I think fundamentally, in order to trust SGX, at the end of the day, Intel has private keys that will let them falsify SGX data. So fundamentally, you must believe that Intel is sufficiently trustworthy, right? And I think that if you're looking at sort of like nation-state level people working in security, I think that's not a universal assumption. I suspect that Intel is plausibly not the only people that have that key, for example.
I've always been curious about your opinion about SGX.
I don't know anything about SGX, but somehow when I hear people talking about it, it seems they don't like it.
That's been my experience as well. Do you have thoughts?
I think this fits in somewhat also the question I would have asked you about the hash functions. What are assumptions that you like for hashing?
What assumptions
I feel like it's
do
just
you like?
it sort of is almost like another cryptographic assumption, right? Working with SGX, like ever believing in it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure like to what extent it's a testable assumption or falsifiable one.
Yeah, I think the question to you there was which ones do you like?
Wait, which hash functions?
I mean, like what assumptions do you disagree with some of the proofs that these hash functions come with?
Well, I mean, right, most hash functions, they don't have security proofs. I mean, the only one I'm aware of is, again, I'm not a big hash expert. The only one I'm aware of with a security proof is Pedersen based on discrete log, which I like, but I'm not a big hash expert, but I think except that, all the hash world is more heuristic, no?
I would say, in some sense, I do think that, with regard to security, some of the zero-knowledge stuff does take things a little faster and looser than the traditional cryptography, like sort of circles has, and partially that's just desire to get the things to be running fast enough so that they can actually get it to work. And I do expect that will become more, conservative over time as well. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sort of to repeat what I said before, because I think it does maybe answer the question, is I have this intuition that you need to mix in a hash two like orthogonal operations, two very different operations. And
there's a question over there.
Yes, it actually belongs a little bit to that theory versus practice thing. For more applications for zero-knowledge proofs, do we need more theoretic work or more practical work? Sorry for the very binary question.
Good.
So, I mean, I actually think that theory has jumped forward in sort of these leaps, right? I think that, if you looked a couple years ago, a lot of zero-knowledge things would be not feasible to use in practice. And, through the sort of creation of these ever-increasing proof systems, Starks and Snarks, there's been massive leaps forward. If there's another massive leap forward that we still haven't found, yes, we should really focus on finding that. It's unclear to me how much of that there is. So in the meantime, because theory doesn't distribute as well, like many people can be working on theory, one of them will happen to stumble across the right answer. On the other hand, the practice, the development, you can just put resources and energy at making these things faster. So I think the short answer is that the practice is much more predictably improvable, and so that if I had money, that's what I would focus on, because theory's a gamble. You never know.
Could that be that it's more incrementally?
Yeah, exactly. And plus,
whereas the theory can come in with a left field that completely changes
more
stuff.
money won't the PhD students do it for the love at the end of the day, right? Like whoever comes up with the next big breakthrough.
Oh no, I'm in it for the money.
So yeah.
Cool. I think we have a question there.
Two questions have accumulated, and I think both relate to something that Gabriel said. One is, how can you prove the correctness or security of a symmetric primitive? I think this is something that the field has been struggling with for a long time. And that means, how can you prove the security of a hash function? And the second one is possibly slightly opinionated. What about reinforced concrete, which is the name of a concrete arithmetization-oriented hash function?
Ooh.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to either of the questions.
Fair enough. Thank you.
So I mean, in terms of, I think in general, symmetric primitives and hashes are sort of, hard to prove. Relating, like the Penderson relation to discrete log does help it, but it's very expensive, right? So I think at the end of the day, there isn't a good answer to that question right now. I think the answer is you just have to reduce the amount of systems that you trust to a very small number, and then hopefully those have been looked at for many, many years and no one's found the answer. I mean, I think SHA-256 is likely very hard to break, since if you could do that, you would own all the Bitcoins. But that said, I think that on the other question, wait, what was the other question?
Reinforced concrete.
Oh, reinforced concrete, yes. So I actually like reinforced concrete because it actually answers your specific concern. So basically their idea is that they do some field-friendly things, and then they run it through a lookup table, so it's like an S-box type of thing, right? Using the sort of P-lookup thing. My personal complaint about reinforced concrete is that they only do that once, and that the way they do it is a little weird. But I think that method, because there's a meet in the middle thing you could do, but I think that method is a good method, and I actually think that the future of field-friendly hashes is very likely to succeed. The 0th crop,
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I guess thoughts on that, and also the previous question about theory versus practice. I think a lot of times theoreticians care just about asymptotics, right? And I think the biggest problem right now is doing transparent snarks post-quantum. There's still log n in the polycommit side. And then there's also the question of how do you prove that hash functions are post-quantum? How do you prove the security of hash functions? I think both of those are related. So if you can come up with good hash functions and then polycommits that are better than log n in program size, that's probably going to be useful actual theory thing to work on. Other than that, it seems like asymptotically you probably can't do much better, right?
Yeah, actually, I did want to say a word about the. I think it would be good if there were no big theoretical advances in the next few years, because I think there should be focus. It's not maybe it can be also a combination of theory and practice, but yeah, we need to focus on how to write and verify that circuits are secure. because I have this fear that the people that are stealing hundreds of millions of dollars every week from smart contracts, when they stop being able to do that, then they'll move to ZK circuits. And I suspect right now that won't be too hard at the way people are very quickly putting ZK circuits into production. So I think we have to focus on how to like really like you verify the an Intel chip or whatever with even formal verification, maybe do things like that even.
Cool. So that was an opinion, and I would normally bring you up, but we are actually on the hour. I think people have had an amazing day, a long day, but maybe you want to have some drinks. Thank you to all of the panelists, actually, a lot of you in the crowd. And I guess a big thank you to coming out to the ZK Summit 7. That concludes our 7th. Woohoo! Yeah! All right. And I guess I'll see you downstairs then. We are going to have more drinks. Cheers.